Snowflakes drifted softly through the frozen air, covering the narrow street in a white silence that seemed almost sacred. In a tiny, dimly lit apartment at the end of the block, a single candle flickered on a cracked wooden table, fighting against the cold darkness of the winter night. The flame trembled with every small gust that slipped through the broken windowpane. Inside, a woman sat quietly on a worn chair, her thin shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Her fingers were red from the cold, and her eyes, tired yet gentle, stared at the empty table before her. On it lay a single cracked plate, a reminder that there was no meal tonight. In the corner of the room, her little boy slept on a torn mattress, curled up under a faded blanket that barely covered his tiny feet. The woman, Maria, had spent the entire day searching for work. She had gone from one bakery to another, hoping someone would need help cleaning dishes, sweeping floors, or even wiping windows. But every place she visited turned her away. "Sorry, we're full," they said. "Come back after the holidays." Their words were polite, but their eyes carried pity she had grown used to. When she returned home, the streets were glowing with lights. Every window she passed revealed families laughing, clinking glasses, and sharing warm dinners. The smell of roasted chicken and baked bread floated through the air, making her stomach ache. She paused once outside a restaurant, staring through the glass as a little girl about her son's age bit into a slice of pie. For a moment, Maria smiled. Then she remembered her own child waiting at home, and the smile vanished. Now, sitting by the flickering candle, she glanced at the old clock on the wall. Midnight was approaching. The sound of church bells echoed faintly in the distance, signaling the arrival of Christmas. She turned toward her son, who had woken up and rubbed his sleepy eyes. "Mommy," he whispered, his voice weak but filled with innocence, "is it Christmas now?" Maria forced a smile. "Yes, sweetheart, it's Christmas." The boy looked at the empty table. "Then where's our dinner? Don't we have cake, Mommy?" Her heart twisted. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Instead, she reached for him, pulling him close to her chest. The warmth of his small body was the only comfort she had left. After a long silence, she whispered softly, "Son, forgive Mommy, this year there's no dinner." The boy didn't cry, he just rested his head on her shoulder and wrapped his tiny arms around her neck. "It's okay, Mommy," he said, half asleep. "I'll dream about food, and when I wake up, maybe Santa will bring us something." A tear rolled down Maria's cheek, landing on his hair. She held him tighter, rocking gently as the candle's flame grew smaller. She wanted to believe in miracles too, but life had taught her to expect little. Still, deep inside, a fragile hope flickered, just like that candle, refusing to die. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer into the night. "God, I don't ask for much. Just let my boy see one more Christmas with a full plate." Outside, the wind howled softly, carrying her words into the snowy darkness. And somewhere far down the street, headlights appeared, belonging to a man whose heart was about to be touched by the same prayer she had just made. Across the quiet, snow-covered street, a black luxury car slowed to a stop under the glow of a flickering street lamp. The soft hum of the engine broke the silence of the night for a brief moment before fading into stillness. Inside the car sat a man dressed in a dark overcoat, his sharp features dimly lit by the dashboard lights. His name was Daniel Carter, a man whose face often appeared in magazines and business journals, the man who built an empire from nothing. Tonight, though, he wasn't a businessman. He was simply a man chasing ghosts from his past. Daniel had spent the evening at a lavish hotel dinner, surrounded by laughter, champagne, and polished silverware. Yet, as the night wore on, he felt a strange emptiness inside him, a hollowness the noise couldn't fill. After excusing himself early, he had driven aimlessly through the old parts of the city, his heart tugged by a sense of nostalgia he couldn't quite name. When he turned onto the narrow street, the one where he once lived as a boy, the memories came flooding back. The smell of coal smoke, the cracked sidewalks, the faint echo of children playing in the snow, everything felt frozen in time. But then his eyes caught something that made him stop breathing for a moment. Through the frost-covered window of a small apartment, he saw a dim candlelight trembling in the dark. A woman sat by the window, her head bowed, holding a sleeping child close to her chest. There was nothing particularly unusual about the scene, Yet something about it struck Daniel deeply. It was painfully familiar. He stared for a long time, his breath fogging the glass. In her face, he saw echoes of his own mother, tired eyes, worn hands, a quiet strength hidden behind exhaustion. He remembered the winters of his childhood, when his mother would pretend to have eaten so he could have her share. He remembered her whispering through tears, "Son, forgive Mommy, there's no dinner tonight." The memory hit him like a wave. He felt his throat tighten. How many nights had his mother cried just like that woman? How many times had he promised himself that if he ever made it, he'd make sure no one went hungry the way they had? Yet here he was, a millionaire in a warm car, watching another mother suffer through the same pain his own once endured. He couldn't look away. The boy's small hand rested on his mother's shoulder, the faintest smile on his face as if dreaming of a world that didn't know hunger. Daniel's chest ached. He reached for the gift bag on the passenger seat. It was full of expensive treats he had brought for a charity dinner he never attended. Chocolates, a roast chicken, a small fruitcake, and a few wrapped presents. For the first time, he knew exactly where they belonged. He stepped out of the car. The icy air bit at his face, but he barely noticed. Snow crunched under his boots as he crossed the street, the warmth of the bag in his hands a strange contrast to the cold night. When he reached the door of the small apartment building, he hesitated. What would she think? A stranger knocking on her door at midnight. But then he heard a faint sound from inside, a muffled sob, quiet and hopeless. That was enough. He took a deep breath and knocked gently. There was a moment of silence. Then footsteps, hesitant, cautious. The door opened a crack, and a pair of wary eyes looked out. Daniel smiled softly, lowering his voice. "I'm sorry to bother you, ma'am," he said, his tone warm but humble. "But I think you forgot something tonight." The woman blinked in confusion. "Forgot something?" she asked, her voice trembling. He lifted the bag slightly. "Yes," he said gently, "your Christmas dinner." For a moment, she just stared, too stunned to speak. Behind her, the boy stirred and opened his eyes, his gaze landing on the stranger with the kind eyes and the warm smile. And for the first time that night, hope entered the room, quietly, like light slipping under a door. Maria stood frozen at the door, her fingers gripping the edge as if afraid the moment might vanish if she blinked. The man before her looked nothing like someone who belonged in this part of town. His coat was finely tailored, his shoes clean despite the snow. His face calm but somehow familiar. Yet his eyes, those soft, weary eyes, carried the same sadness she had seen in her own reflection countless times. She hesitated. "You must be mistaken," she whispered. "We didn't order anything." Daniel smiled gently, his voice kind. "I know, but it's Christmas Eve. No one should be without a meal tonight." He held out the bag. The aroma of roasted chicken escaped into the cold air, wrapping around them like a warm blanket. The boy behind her sat up, his small eyes wide with wonder. "Mommy, it smells so good," he said, his voice trembling with excitement. Maria's lips quivered. "I can't accept this," she murmured, shaking her head. "We don't even know you." Daniel took a step closer, lowering his voice. "You don't have to. Just think of me as someone who once needed the same kindness." Something in his tone broke her defenses. After a pause, she slowly opened the door wider and stepped aside. "Please, come in," she said softly. The warmth of the apartment was faint, but the feeling inside it was suddenly different, lighter, fuller. Daniel set the bag on the table, then began taking out the food: chicken, bread rolls, a small fruitcake, and a box of chocolates. Maria watched in disbelief as the table transformed from empty to overflowing within seconds. The boy clapped his hands, his laughter filling the room. "Mommy, it's a real Christmas dinner," he shouted, jumping with joy. Maria covered her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks. "You have no idea what this means," she whispered. "We haven't eaten since yesterday." Daniel looked down, his voice quiet but steady. "Actually, I do know." She glanced at him, confused. "What do you mean?" He took a deep breath, his eyes distant, as if seeing another time. "When I was your son's age, I was just like him. My mother and I lived in a tiny room not far from here. We had nothing, not even hope some nights. I remember one Christmas when she told me, 'Son, forgive Mommy, there's no dinner.' I never forgot those words. They burned into my heart. Maria stared at him, speechless. Daniel smiled faintly. I promised myself that if I ever made it, I'd make sure no mother ever had to say those words again. The boy tugged at Daniel's sleeve. Did you get food later? He asked innocently. Daniel chuckled softly, kneeling beside him. Yes, I did, because someone kind enough to care showed up one day, just like tonight. For a long moment, the only sounds were the crackle of the candle and the boy's soft laughter as he bit into a piece of bread. The warmth in the room seemed to grow, not from fire, but from something deeper, compassion. Maria sat across from Daniel, tears still glistening in her eyes. You're a good man, she said quietly. He shook his head. No, just someone who remembers. He reached into his coat pocket and placed an envelope on the table. Inside is a card. My company runs a community kitchen project. We're looking for people who understand hunger, who know what it means to care. If you want, there's a job waiting for you. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was more than an offer, it was a promise of a new life. I don't know what to say, she whispered, choking back emotion. Daniel smiled warmly. Just say yes, and promise me one thing, that you'll never stop believing that miracles still happen. Maria nodded, covering her face with her hands as she sobbed quietly, not from sadness, but from a kind of joy she hadn't felt in years. That night, they ate together, a millionaire, a mother, and her child, not as strangers, but as a family connected by a single truth: kindness has a way of finding those who need it most. Snow was falling again, soft, slow, and silent, just like it had a year ago. But this time, the tiny apartment at the corner of the street didn't look like a place of despair. It glowed with golden light that spilled out from the windows onto the snow-covered sidewalk. The faint smell of freshly baked bread drifted into the air, mixing with laughter and the sound of children's voices echoing inside. Maria stood near the stove, wearing a clean white apron with the logo of the Carter Community Kitchen embroidered on it. Her hands moved gracefully, stirring a pot of soup as steam rose to meet her smiling face. A small radio played a Christmas melody in the background, and her son, Leo, now a year older and taller, was busy setting the table with proud determination. Careful with the plates, sweetheart, Maria said with a gentle laugh. They're the only fancy ones we've got. Leo grinned. I know, Mommy, but tonight's special. We have to make everything perfect. He stood on tiptoe to light a candle, the same candle that had once burned weakly in their darkest night. Now it burned bright and strong, its flame steady and full of life. Maria paused for a moment, watching her son's excitement. The memory of last Christmas flashed through her mind. The hunger, the cold, the tears. And then the knock on the door. The stranger with kind eyes. The miracle she'd prayed for. Her life had changed since that night. Daniel Carter had kept his word. The job he offered wasn't just work, it was purpose. She had started as a helper in the community kitchen, serving meals to those in need. But her sincerity and compassion caught everyone's attention. Within months, she was promoted to manager. Now, every evening, she cooked for families who had nothing, the same way someone once cooked for her. The kitchen had become a haven, a place where the hungry found food, and the hopeless found warmth. And every time she saw a mother walk in, holding a child close to her chest, Maria would remember herself from that night and smile softly, knowing exactly how it felt. The doorbell rang, snapping her out of her thoughts. Leo ran to answer it, and his delighted voice filled the air. Mommy, it's Mr. Daniel. Maria turned just as Daniel stepped in, brushing snow from his coat. His smile was the same, kind, warm, and a little shy. Merry Christmas, he said, handing her a basket filled with fresh fruits and sweets. Merry Christmas, Maria replied, her eyes bright with gratitude. You shouldn't have brought anything. You've already given us everything. Daniel chuckled softly. You gave me something too, you know. Maria tilted her head. What could I possibly give you? He looked around the cozy apartment. The laughter, the smell of food, the joy that filled the air. You reminded me what all this is for, he said simply. You gave me back faith. I'd forgotten what it felt like to really see people, to see their hearts. She smiled, her eyes misty. Then I guess we both got our miracles. Leo came running, holding a small handmade card. "I made this for you, Mr. Daniel," he said proudly. Daniel took it and opened it. Inside, drawn in crayons, was a picture of 3 people, a man, a woman, and a boy, sitting around a table with food and candles. Above them were the words, "Thank you for our dinner." For a long moment, Daniel couldn't speak. He just smiled and placed a hand on Leo's head. "It's perfect," he whispered. Later that evening, they sat down together, the 3 of them once again sharing a meal. But this time, there was no hunger, no cold, no emptiness, only warmth, laughter, and the feeling of family. As snowflakes kissed the window, Maria looked at the candlelight dancing on the walls and whispered softly, "Son, forgive Mommy, for ever doubting that miracles are real." Leo reached across the table, his small hand finding hers. "That's okay, Mommy," he said with a grin. "Because now we make miracles for other people." Daniel looked at them both, his heart full. And for the first time in many years, he truly believed that the greatest wealth in the world wasn't what money could buy, but what kindness could build.